This episode of the Digital Desperados podcast is brought to you by SaferNet VPN, found online at SaferNet.com.
Welcome to the Digital Desperados podcast featuring dark tales from the web. Patrick McMurphy's here today to tell us our dark tales, and he's joined by Brad Hawkins, founder and CEO of SaferNet VPN. I'm Jim Brangenberg, and I'll kind of sort of serve as your story guy, but my role here is still yet undefined. This podcast is, of course, brought to you by SaferNet. SaferNet brings safety and security to your business and organization through a powerful VPN, web filters, internet controls, and an easy-to-use internet console where you can see what everyone is doing on the internet while you're paying them during their workday. It's priced so that everyone can take advantage of these powerful features on every one of your devices. Check it out online at SaferNet.com. That's SaferNet.com. All right, Patrick, what dark tale are you telling us about today?
Well, today, Jim, I want to talk about a big one, and that is Julian Assange. So Julian is, there's so much information on this dude. And more importantly, he was just in the news for massive news. So it's really timely that we decided to do this one and then all the news happened.
Timely or dangerous, one or the other.
One of those two. So Assange is born on July 3rd, 1971 in Townsville, Queensland, Australia. His mother was Christine Ann Hawkins. She was a visual artist. His father was John Shipton. He was an anti-war activist and a builder. However, his parents separated before he was born. His mother pretty quickly married again to this individual called Brad Assange. And so really, if you talk to Julian Assange these days, he would say Brett, he considers Brett his father, and that's why he has that surname. However, that marriage also ended, and Christine later had a relationship with a musician called Leif Moynell, who is another character in itself entirely. So Julian later describes Leif as a member of an Australian cult. The cult were called The Family. They were massive in Australia. So this group, they taught a mixture of Western and Eastern religions. Their leader claimed to be a reincarnation of Jesus. So it's widely described as a cult. You can see immediately these people are off the wall entirely. So thankfully, by the time Julian was 11, Leif and his mother separated. And so he got removed away from the cult, which is great, obviously. Yet still his early life, he's making a lot of moves. He lived in over 30 different Australian towns by his mid-teens. And so he had this nomadic lifestyle, and it was due to, his mother had a lot of relationships. She was also involved in various theater projects. So he was a nomadic kid. A lot of his education due to this was self-directed. It was homeschooling. And that kind of education contributed massively to his independent thinking, his self-reliance. Assange, at a very early age, also developed an interest in computers and hacking. By 16, he acquired a computer, a Commodore 64. And I could probably have 10 episodes dedicated to Commodore 64s because they were beautiful machines back in the day. They were just gorgeous machines.
I was going to say, how many of our hackers started with a Commodore?
Very few. Very few. I can tell you that for a fact, very few. But it's with the Commodore, he's exploring this nascent world of computer networks. Eventually, he settles in Melbourne with his half-brother and his mother. And at 17, he moves in with his girlfriend. At this point, he's talking to other hackers online, in an early version of online. And he takes on this hacking name called Mendax. And Mendax is Latin. It means nobly untruthful, which, probably doesn't bear well for the rest of his life.
Seems like an oxymoron. Nobly untruthful. Okay.
So it's it's telling a lot there. But 1987, Assange, he co-founds a group called the International Subversives with two other hackers called Trax and Prime Suspect. Again, these hacking names, they're just kind of lining themselves up for arrest. It's just, why would you call yourself Prime Suspect? Come on. But the group, really, they accessed a lot of secure systems, including those of companies like Nortel. Nortel were an international telecommunications company. And what he was doing, he was using a lot of social engineering to get password into various companies, including the Australian overseas telecommunications mainframes. So he was expanding quickly here. But he had a very
Patrick, social engineering, what do you mean by he started with social engineering?
Well, it's something that's used a lot nowadays, and it's becoming more popular. But effectively, it's something as easy as, you know, you run a company and you get an email from someone claiming to be the CFO, and they're like, "Hey, I lost the password for, you know, our payroll. What is it again?" And the person will just automatically shoot you back the password. It sounds so dumb, but I can tell you in practice, it works so often. If you get any sort of big company going, someone's going to attempt to socially engineer you. So it's social hacking basically.
It is I didn't know it went back so far, but it is all over the place. I get probably one or two emails. It might be a little bit of an exaggeration, but one or two emails a week on one of my employees saying they have to change their direct deposit numbers and please be in contact with, you know, HR or whatever to be able to do it. It's really kind of amazing how crafty they are. But I'm surprised back then they were doing it. So
yeah, and it's, you know, it's even more widespread now with things like Facebook. You know, you'll see a Facebook saying, "Oh, tell me your mother's maiden name," and it'll have like 1,000 comments. People say their mother's maiden name, which is nearly always your password reset. It's just, it's insane. But Assange, he had a self-imposed set of ethics. He never crashed or damaged systems he hacked, and he always found any information he found on the systems. So if he found any sensitive data about companies, you know, doing wrong or anything, he would share that. And this is kind of, we see how it gets started with Assange here. It's hacktivism. It's very early hacktivism. It's getting information out there.
For those with more sensitive American English ears, hacktivism. Hacktivism with an H at the beginning of there. Okay.
Apologies. So Assange and his group, they kept up with this hacking and they began targeting more international entities. 1991 was the first big one. It was against Milnet. And so Milnet was a data network used by the US military. And so Assange says he claims that he found reports here of the US military even hacking other parts of itself. So I'm not sure what was going on there, but he was implying that the US military weren't, you know, as joined as they seemed. He said he also created a backdoor there that he'd have control over 2 years. And just to explain what a backdoor is in a network, if you break into a system and you establish a backdoor, that means you can get back in very easily at any time later on. And so he had written various programs at this point to allow his group to, and now I've quoted him, they said they did massive attacks on the US military, basically targeting what they say was a who's who of the US military industrial complex. I don't have a lot of proof for that, but he's basically claiming at the time they were all over the US military. The group became very well known internationally and in Australia. He later said he was a famous teenage hacker in Australia and that he had been reading generals' emails since he was 17, which is probably true, honestly, knowing this guy, but it's an outrageous claim still. But he does call this era a low-tech rehearsal for WikiLeaks, which we're going to get onto shortly. Now, you know, you can't just go around hacking Milnet. The guys got fined by the police in 1981. It's not going to fly. It took a very long time for the court case to complete. Assange fell into a deep depression during this. While waiting for trial, he checked himself into a psychiatric hospital. He spent 6 months sleeping in the wilderness around Melbourne. He wasn't in a good place. He was charged with 31 counts of hacking and related crimes, and he faced a theoretical sentence of 290 years in prison. Come 1996, he pleads guilty to 25 charges, but these end up getting dropped due to a plea deal. He was fined and he was placed on a good behaviour bond. And what I want to explain about the plea deal here, because it gets skipped over by a lot of people. What he did for his plea deal, he basically provided technical help and support to the Victoria Police Child Exploitation Unit. So what he was doing, he was exposing paedophiles effectively who were distributing material, publishing material. And so that was a part of the plea deal that he would help find these people. And so Assange kind of described the trial as a formative period. And according to one publication, this really set him on this intellectual path in terms of going ahead and finding WikiLeaks.
Wow, unbelievable. But I love the fact that the police, again, another criminal getting used by the police or the military for their their ends.
All the time.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like, well, hey, listen, as long as we've got you, let's say we use you and we'll make a deal with you. Brad, Assange using backdoors to get into people, using social engineering, all those kinds of things. SaferNet today, if a company's got SaferNet, how much of that is, I mean, I know people can still allow stupid people into their computers. They could just do that. That happens. But SaferNet makes it a lot easier for us to be out there in the internet so people can't get access to it, doesn't it?
Well, there's two different things. One is if he's putting backdoors into software, online software, SaferNet does not necessarily work with software. What we do is we block access to devices. So any device out there, whether it's a laptop, a cell phone, even tablets, we will lock those down and not allow somebody to be able to break in through that process. If someone tries to go through software into a network, we'll stop that. And so that's where the difference between the two go. And I think it's really important to understand that those two things, because there's criminals that attack and try to get in and steal data from devices. And then there's people that try to access through software. And there is fantastic software that block the software from being attacked. And then we create some fantastic software to protect devices from being attacked. So there's a little distinction between the two.
If you want to check out all that SaferNet has to offer, just check them out online, SaferNet.com, SaferNet.com. Back to you, Patrick.
Right, so following the arrest and all this and, the plea deal, he's on the right side of crime for a little while. His main political focus at the time was using the internet to share information. He was co-authoring books, he was writing encryption programs, he was extensively writing about making the internet more accessible. By 1998, him and Trax, one of his old hacking buddies, they established an ethical hacking company called Earthman Technology. He was making big money at the time as well, because he was working as a consultant for large corporations around cybersecurity. At the same time, he's also financially backing big leakers online. If there's any charitable cases, he's backing all of them. But 2001 is the big one. And so Assange and a group of dissidents, mathematicians and activists, they established WikiLeaks. And Assange becomes a member of its advisory board. From 2007 to 2010, he's traveling a lot on WikiLeaks business. He's going to Africa, Asia, Europe, and North America. And now, before I get into what his thought process behind WikiLeaks was, what it actually is, it leaks information. So this might be from big government, big company, things like that. He ends up publishing a 5-page essay on the thought experiment behind WikiLeaks. And that's using leaks to force organizations to reduce levels of things like abuse and dishonesty. Now, in his own words, bear with me on this quote, because I had to reread it about 10 times to even understand what he meant by it. But in his essay, he says, the more secretive or unjust an organization is, the more leaks induce fear and paranoia in the leadership and planning coterie. This must result in minimization of efficient internal communication mechanisms and consequent system cognitive decline, resulting in decreased ability to hold on to power as the environment demands adaptation. Now, it took me, again, 10 readings to understand that, and what I believe he's saying is that he can just use leaks to basically force organizations, etc., to be more in line morally. But he could have put it in much simpler terms, I feel.
Yeah.
Can you imagine sitting around a board trying to come up with that statement? Wait a minute, I like this word better. It's like,
the hours.
We're still processing. The more secretive or unjust an organization is, the more leaks induce fear and paranoia in the leadership and planning.
Yeah.
This results in a minimization of efficient internal communications. In other words, they're so freaked out, they don't communicate anything, and causes a cognitive decline within the company. In other words, they stop being efficient. Wow. And wow, that is a heck of a, and a decreased ability to hold on to power as the environment demands adaptation. Wow. Yeah. Basically what he's saying, he's saying, hey, if they're hiding stuff, it screws up the organization.
Yeah, exactly. And
it's really.
Go ahead,
I was going to say, what's really interesting about that is that it became a very, very big deal because everybody was truly afraid of what was going to come out on WikiLeaks, and so. But you look at a couple of things. One is the need for intelligence in being able to manage software is that, you've got these highly intelligent people that we've seen over and over again gone criminal, doing these very criminal acts. Well, gosh, if somebody has an ounce of intelligence and goes into some software development or network administration or whatever it is, there's a wide open field in there for honest, intelligent people to be able to walk in there and do incredible work. But on the other hand, you also look at the fact that we have a media in both sides, and I don't want to cause a media argument, but we have a media on both sides that narrow their conversation into their only desire to communicate a specific agenda, right? Where that leaves a wide open opportunity for something like WikiLeaks to be able to say, you know what, if you guys aren't going to do your job, I'm going to go and expose things all over the place. And so, there's a lot of philosophical conversation around the understanding of how this thing came to be. But I find that fascinating to sit around a fire pit and have long conversations around how does this all happen when this is all pretty new stuff to be battling this direction. So
what I find interesting is that this is just the setup for what Julian Assange really became famous for. And we're already really deep into this. And we're out of time today, Patrick McMurphy. We're going to have to do a part 2 on this because this story is so good. Can we hold off? We'll hold off the second half to the next episode of the Digital Desperados. You heard it all here. The internet and everything digital can have a dark side with many dark players and even some white knight dark players like Julian Assange. That's why you need SaferNet by your side, VPN, antivirus, 84 web filters, and so much more. Thanks to SaferNet for supporting our efforts to bring these stories to your ears and to give them the exposure that they need. Please, for your own security and the security of those you love and those you work with, check out SaferNet.com and get secured today. And only click on the attachments and respond to the emails from people that you trust and those you love and delete the rest, or you may become the next victim of a digital desperado.
This episode of the Digital Desperados podcast is brought to you by SaferNet VPN, found online at SaferNet.com.
We have an app for that? What? An app for cybersecurity for all your devices? Are you a business owner concerned about cybersecurity? SaferNet VPN offers the perfect solution. Protect your company and family with a single app. With our cloud-connected cybersecurity platform, enjoy VPN, internet controls, and virus protection. Stay safe online with SaferNet VPN today. Get secured now. Sign up at SaferNet.com. That's SaferNet.com.